That morning began just like thousands of others in our apartment on the 28th floor overlooking the Chicago skyline, which was slowly waking up from its slumber. The air was still crisp, carrying the last breath of the night dew. This freshness seeped through the slightly opened balcony window, which I always intentionally left in that position. I always loved this atmosphere, this thick silence. It seemed as if the massive city held its breath for a moment. Right before the endless hustle began, I stepped soundlessly across the cold marble floor. I had developed this habit over many years so as not to wake Andrew, my husband, the center of my universe for the past 11 years. My morning routine was almost a soothing ritual. Brew black coffee, linger on the balcony for a moment to feel the breeze on my face, and then head to the bathroom to get ready. Everything was on autopilot, a sequence of movements my muscles had memorized. In the bathroom, decorated in shades of ivory and aged gold, I turned on the hot water to wash my face and started brushing my teeth. The foam of the mint toothpaste with its sharp taste filled my mouth. And it was exactly then, amidst the monotonous motions of the toothbrush, that I saw it. Andrew's cell phone was lying on the marble vanity next to an almost empty bottle of liquid soap. Its screen, previously pitch black, suddenly lit up, emitting a glow that pierced my eyes in the dim bathroom. A notification appeared on the lock screen. It was not a message from a work group chat, nor was it a meeting reminder. The sender's name was unfamiliar to me, a name I had never heard from Andrew's lips, Natalie. And beneath that name was a short phrase. A phrase that was enough to make my world stop. I cannot wait for our weekend at the cabin, the wine, and that high-end lingerie I bought, counting down the days. The movement of my hand abruptly stopped. The brush was still in my mouth, but I could no longer feel a thing. The fresh mint foam now took on a strange, bitter aftertaste, slowly dissolving and dripping down the corners of my lips. My eyes were glued to the phone screen. I reread the phrase over and over, as if searching for a different meaning, an alternative possibility, even the slightest hint of a misunderstanding. Our cabin, lingerie. Every word was a nail driven straight into my heart. Through the frosted glass door of the shower, I heard the sound of water. Andrew was taking a shower. I could hear him quietly humming. It was an old jazz tune he always played in the car. The sound of the falling water and his careless humming felt like a mockery. I stood there, paralyzed by the proof of betrayal unfolding before my eyes with brutal clarity. And he, just a few steps away from me, was starting his day without any burden, entirely unaware that his world, our world, had just suffered an irreversible fracture. The phone screen went dark again, but the phrase was already imprinted in my brain, burned into my retinas. I did not need to unlock his phone. I did not need to know more. What I felt in that moment was not an explosive shock. Rather, it was a confirmation. The feeling that the final piece of a horrific puzzle I had tried so hard to ignore had finally fallen into place. Over the last few months, there had been many little things that seemed strange to me. Andrew started staying late at work more often, making excuses about sudden meetings. Unexpected business trips to New York or Miami were announced so abruptly that I barely had time to ask for details. His cell phone, which he used to leave lying around anywhere, was now always placed face down on the table or safely tucked away in his pants pocket. Even when he went to the restroom, he took it with him. A new password appeared on his laptop, which I used to be able to access at any time. But what hurt me the most was his gaze. His eyes, which always used to look at me with warmth, with the feeling of coming home, now often slid past me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the apartment, like a painting on the wall that no longer draws attention after long contemplation. I had often tried to calm myself down. "Do not be paranoid, Chloe," I would whisper to myself during sleepless nights waiting for him. "Everyone gets tired. Marriage takes effort. Do not invent problems out of nowhere." Now, standing before the sink with a mouthful of toothpaste, I wanted to go back in time and scream at myself. "Do not be a fool, Chloe. Stop making excuses for him." I turned on the faucet, quickly rinsed my mouth, and washed my face with cold water. My hands did not shake when I dried off with the towel. Strangely enough, I felt empty, a cold and vast emptiness. It felt as if my soul had detached from my body and was observing everything from the corner of the room. I watched myself continue my routine, applying moisturizer, a bit of powder, a neutral shade of lipstick. It all felt like a theatrical performance. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Andrew was already dressed. He stood before the large mirror in our bedroom, adjusting a navy blue tie. He saw my reflection and smiled, the same smile as every morning, a smile that now seemed to me the most disgusting mask I had ever seen. I have a client seminar in New York this weekend, honey, he said, adjusting his shirt collar. I probably will not be back until Sunday evening. Will you be okay on your own? I slowly nodded. My voice sounded much steadier than I expected. Without emotion. Without a tremor. Of course, do not forget to pack a warm jacket. Nights in New York can be chilly. I did not ask about Natalie. I did not ask about the lingerie. I did not want to ruin the performance he had so carefully staged, because in my cold and empty mind, something else was beginning to take shape. A plan. A counterattack scenario. And until everything was perfectly prepared, I would not say a single word. I would play my part flawlessly too, just as he did. That morning, I became the best actress in the drama of his betrayal. I gave him the smile of a loving wife, even though the love that once burned in my heart had now turned into cold ash, and from that ash, something much harder and sharper was beginning to grow. That evening felt longer than usual. The hands of the wall clock moved with agonizing slowness. Every tick echoed in the silence of the apartment. Andrew returned home on time with a box of pastries from my favorite bakery. A small gesture that, in other times, would have warmed my heart. But that night, it felt like an empty formality, an attempt to hide his lies behind the sweetness of chocolate and cream. We ate dinner together, chatting about trivial things. His work at the office, a new project I was immersed in, the worsening Chicago traffic. Outwardly, everything seemed normal. The facade of a happy marriage that we played so masterfully. I turned into a meticulous observer. I watched as Andrew placed his phone face down on the table, how his eyes occasionally darted to that object, as if drawn by an invisible magnet. I observed his smile, which never reached his eyes. Every minor detail was yet another piece of evidence reinforcing the certainty that had settled in my mind that morning. Andrew had a habit. Every Thursday night, after playing tennis with his friends, he would come home, drink 2 glasses of whiskey, and go to sleep. It was his stress relief ritual. And I knew that after those 2 drinks, he would fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, sinking like a stone, completely deaf to the world around him. That night was a Thursday, a coincidence that felt like fate. I waited until his breathing became steady and deep, the faint smell of whiskey mixed with the scent of soap in the cool bedroom air, chilled by the air conditioning. I lay next to him, staring at the dark ceiling, allowing my racing heart to slowly return to a normal rhythm. It was time. Like a thief in my own home, I got out of bed with extreme caution. I walked around to his side. His phone was charging on the nightstand. The white cable was plugged into the outlet like an umbilical cord, giving it life. I slowly unplugged it. I knew his fingerprint, the index finger of his right hand. For years, I had unlocked his phone to set alarms or answer calls while he was driving. An action that used to be based on trust was now the key to his Pandora's box. I took his relaxed hand. His skin was warm. For a brief second, a fleeting memory washed over me. The very first time that hand held mine, so firmly, so confidently. I quickly pushed the memory away. This was no time for nostalgia. I gently pressed the pad of his index finger against the scanner. Click. The screen lit up, revealing perfectly organized apps. My heart beat a little faster. There was no turning back now. I did not go straight to his text messages. I started with the photo gallery. I scrolled through hundreds of photos of us together. Vacations in Miami, my birthday party. Random shots he took when I was not looking. They all felt like relics from another person's life. And then I found it. The hidden folder. It took me a couple of tries to guess the passcode. His birth date turned out to be far too obvious. Inside was another world. The world of Andrew and Natalie, their car selfies, photos in dimly lit coffee shops, and the most painful of all, a photo of them together against the backdrop of a wooden cabin that looked entirely too familiar. Our cabin in Door County, Wisconsin. The very one we had bought 2 years ago with my annual bonus as our anniversary gift, the place where we were supposed to build our shared memories. He was already building them, just not with me. There was even a photo of Natalie alone, smiling at the camera with a triumphant look, wearing one of Andrew's dress shirts. Nausea rose in my throat. I swallowed it down and kept going. After the photos, I opened the messaging apps. Their conversation was a novel of betrayal. Affectionate nicknames, plans for secret rendezvous, Andrew's complaints about me. He claimed I was too consumed by work, that I was too cold, that I did not care about him. Every sentence he wrote was a slap in the face. He painted me as the villain in his story, making it seem as though this affair was my fault. And then I found more information about Natalie. Her full name was Natalie Miller, a medical equipment sales representative at a large pharmaceutical company. Most importantly, In one of the older chats, I found a message that changed everything. Leo will be in Seattle all next week for work. The cabin will be empty. Leo was her husband. That meant Natalie was a traitor too. This was not just a problem between Andrew and me. There was another wounded person in this game. Another person whose heart was being broken while he suspected nothing. In that exact moment, a larger, much bolder idea formed in my mind. This was no longer just a wife's revenge. This was a matter of justice. I did not sleep a wink that night. My hands, now cold and resolute, went to work. I took screenshots of all the key conversations and every photo in that hidden folder. I tracked the transactions on Andrew's credit card, which was linked to my account. Hotel charges in New York on the dates he supposedly had seminars, bills from expensive restaurants we had never visited together. I saved everything, archiving it into a secret folder on my own laptop. In one night, I had transformed into a detective, piecing together the fragments of my husband's double life. By dawn, I found what I was looking for. I typed the name Leonard Pierce into a professional networking site and added the keyword architect, which had been mentioned in their texts. And there he was. His profile picture showed a man with a strong jawline, slightly messy hair, and a smile that, while looking a bit tired, seemed genuine. His profile stated that he was the director of an architectural firm specializing in sustainable design. A pang of sympathy for this man pricked my heart. He was just as much a victim as I was. I sat in front of my laptop in the dark living room, illuminated only by the glow of the screen. I typed a short message, deleted it, and typed it again. I did this dozens of times, searching for the right words. Finally, I stopped overthinking and let my fingers move on their own. Hello, Leo. My name is Chloe Davis. I am convinced that my husband Andrew is having an affair with your wife Natalie. If you are interested, I can share the evidence I have. Here is my phone number. I stared at that message for several minutes. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. I took a deep breath and clicked it. The message was sent. Andrew's phone was already back in its exact spot, as if no one had ever touched it. The morning sun began to peek through the Chicago skyscrapers. A new day had begun, and my war was about to break out. The time following that click dragged with agonizing slowness. Every second felt like a grain of sand resisting its fall in an hourglass. I went back to the bedroom, placed Andrew's phone in its precise position, and returned to the living room. I sat on the soft couch, but my body was tense. My morning coffee, usually so delicious, now left only a sour taste on my tongue. Outside the window, the city began to stretch. The distant sound of a car horn, the hum of engines starting. Everything sounded detached and muffled, as if I were inside a soundproof bubble. I gripped my phone tightly in my hand. It felt as heavy as a grenade with the pin already pulled. All I could do was wait. Wait for the explosion, or for the worst possible outcome, which was that nothing would happen. What if Leo did not believe me? What if he decided I was some crazy, jealous woman trying to destroy his marriage? Or worse, what if he called Natalie to check, and Natalie told Andrew everything? My plan would crumble before it even started. I would look like a fool, a pathetic figure. Thoughts swarmed in my head like a flock of crows. I tried to chase them away by turning on the TV, opening my laptop to check work emails, but it was all in vain. My concentration was shattered. The numbers in the spreadsheets, which usually seemed so orderly and logical to me, now seemed to dance pointlessly. Chloe Davis, Chief Financial Officer, known for her calm demeanor and ability to control the most complex situations, now felt she had lost control over the only thing that truly mattered, her own life. An hour later, Andrew walked out of the bedroom. He was wearing a flawless light blue dress shirt. His damp hair was combed back. He placed a light kiss on my forehead, a gesture so automatic that I barely felt it. I am heading out, he said. I will call you when I land in New York. Drive safely to the airport, I replied, forcing a smile. As he walked to the door, I felt an overwhelming urge to scream at him, to confront him with all his lies right then and there, but I held back. Hot, explosive anger was a luxury I could not afford. My anger was cold, icy. I was sharpening it until it turned into a weapon. After Andrew left, the apartment felt even quieter and emptier. All morning, I wandered from the living room to the kitchen and back again. Every time my phone vibrated with an email notification or a work chat message, my heart leaped into my throat. 3 hours felt like 3 years. I was ready to give up, to convince myself that this had been a stupid idea, when the phone finally rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. My hand trembled slightly as I swiped the green icon. I stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air and calm my racing heart. "Hello," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. On the other end of the line, there was silence, just heavy breathing. Then a man's voice answered, deep and exhausted. "This is Leo Pierce. I received your message." His voice was exactly as I had imagined, outwardly calm, but I could feel an underlying tremor, the tremor of a foundation that had just cracked. "Thank you for calling," I said. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" he asked bluntly. "No pleasantries. I liked that." "I wish it were," I replied. My throat was parched. "But I am afraid it is not. I have proof. Messages, photos, even their plans for this coming weekend." I heard him exhale heavily, the sigh of a man whose world had just been turned upside down. "This weekend, Natalie told me she was going to Door County with her coworkers for a corporate retreat." His voice sounded as if he were talking more to himself than to me. "My husband told me he was going to a client seminar in New York," I countered. "They are planning to meet at our cabin in Wisconsin." The mention of the cabin acted like a physical blow. The silence on the other end of the line grew thicker. The cabin that I bought, the cabin that, perhaps, he designed. We were both betrayed in a space that rightfully belonged to us. "What do you want?" he finally asked. There was hesitation in his words. This was the decisive moment. I took a deep breath and gathered all my courage. "I want us to catch them there together, before they even have the chance to uncork the wine or take off their jackets." Silence again. I could picture Leo on the other end of the line, weighing my words. A crazy request. A scene straight out of a movie. I was prepared for him to refuse, for him to call me insane. "I do not want a scandal," he said after a moment. "I do not want screaming." "Neither do I quickly replied. "I just want them to see us, to face the truth without any opportunity for new lies or excuses." I heard him breathing again, feeling the internal conflict raging inside him. The desire to run away from this bitter reality, battling the need to face it head-on. "Fine," he said at last. That single word sounded heavy. It was filled with resignation and resolve. "But let us meet first. I want to see everything you know with my own eyes." A wave of relief rushed through my body, making my knees weak. I was not alone. I had an ally. "Of course," I said. "When and where?" We agreed to meet the next day, Saturday morning, at a small diner at a highway rest stop off Interstate 94 on the way to Wisconsin. Neutral territory halfway between our divided worlds. After hanging up, I stayed on the balcony, looking out at Chicago, now bustling with life. My mood had shifted. The emptiness I felt that morning was now filled with a clear purpose, a strange alliance forged in identical pain. We were two strangers united by betrayal, and we were going to face this storm together. On Saturday morning, the sky was gray, as if even the weather felt the tension lingering in the air. I drove alone down the busy interstate. The music that usually accompanied me on drives now felt like a frustrating distraction, so I turned off the radio. The only sound was the hum of tires on the asphalt and the steady vibration of the engine. My mind was racing. I ran through every possible scenario of what might happen when I met Leo. I arrived at the rest stop half an hour before our scheduled time. It was fairly crowded. Families heading out for vacation and travelers stopping for a break. I chose an inconspicuous booth in the corner of the diner, ordered a black coffee, and took a seat with a perfect view of the entrance. I could see everyone walking in and out. Every time the door opened, my heart beat a little faster. At exactly 10 o'clock, a tall man in a light brown jacket walked in. His stride was determined, but his shoulders were slightly hunched, as if he were carrying an invisible weight. I recognized him instantly from his profile picture. Leo. The exhaustion in his eyes was far more real in person. He looked around, and his eyes met mine. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. I gave a slight nod. He walked over to my booth and sat in the chair across from me without saying a word. No formal greetings, no introductions. We already knew each other in the strangest and most painful way possible. "Would you like to order something?" I offered, trying to break the awkward silence. He shook his head. "No, thank you. Let us get straight to business." I sighed and pulled my phone out of my purse. I placed it on the table between my coffee mug and a small bottle of hand sanitizer. I opened the gallery, navigated to the folder I had prepared, and slid the phone toward him. "Here it is," I said quietly. Leo stared at the phone for a few moments before picking it up. He had large, strong hands, the hands of an architect, a man who builds things. The irony was cruel. The hands that had built so much now had to hold the evidence of what had been destroyed. He started swiping through the screen with his thumb. I watched his face closely. I saw his jaw tighten as he read the affectionate messages between Andrew and Natalie. I saw a muscle twitch in his temple at the sight of their selfies, where they smiled so happily. I saw him hold his breath looking at the credit card statements, the hotel rooms, and the romantic dinners. But the strongest reaction came from one specific photo. The picture of Natalie posing on the deck of the Door County cabin. I saw his hand grip the phone tighter. His knuckles turned white as his eyes focused on the details in the background. The wooden beams he had chosen, the design of the railing, the floor tiles. In that moment, I realized he was not just looking at a photo of his unfaithful wife. He was looking at betrayal inside his own masterpiece. He was seeing lies desecrating a space he had created with his own sweat and imagination. He placed the phone back on the table incredibly slowly, as if it were fragile crystal. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for a moment, and let out a devastatingly heavy sigh. "I picked out those floor tiles myself," he rasped. "Every little detail of that house, I chose it. Natalie used to say she did not really like going up there, that it was too quiet." He let out a dry laugh devoid of any humor. "Turns out, she just did not like going up there with me." Silence draped over our booth. I gave him time to process it all. I knew that pain, the agony of realizing that a place you considered sacred had been tainted. I suspected it. He spoke again, staring blankly out the window. For a long time now, she was becoming more and more distant, getting angry over trivial things, refusing to have serious conversations or go to marriage counseling. She always said I worked too much, that I had no time for her. Now I understand. She did not need my time because she was giving all of hers to someone else. It was my turn to share my story, about how Andrew's little lies piled up to form a mountain, about my ignored feelings, about how our financial situation had been strained because of Andrew's lavish lifestyle, a fact he had kept completely hidden. We talked for almost an hour. Not like two strangers, but like two people in the same boat, caught together in a storm of betrayal. We were no longer alone. "I still have a spare key to the cabin," Leo said suddenly. His eyes now looked directly into mine with a new gleam, a gleam of resolve. "Natalie does not know I kept it. Andrew thinks I am on a business trip in Seattle this weekend. She cannot possibly imagine that I am anywhere near Wisconsin." "Then we will go first," Leo said. "We will wait for them there. But like I said, no yelling and no scandals. We will just sit there, let them see us, and the truth will do the rest." I was in complete agreement. Our plan now felt real, tangible. We ironed out the details. They would arrive around 6 o'clock the next evening. We would be there early in the morning to set our stage. We would be both the audience and the lead actors in the final performance of our marriages. When we parted ways outside the diner, there was no handshake, no drawn-out goodbyes, just a brief nod, a silent understanding. We were partners in this painful mission. Driving back home, I felt strange. My burden had not gotten any lighter, but I was no longer carrying it alone. There was someone else who understood it. Someone else who would stand right beside me when the storm hit. The sky remained gray, but it felt as if, in the distance, I could see a faint ray of light. Not the light of hope to fix what was broken, but the light of an absolute finale. And for now, that was enough. On Sunday morning, I drove out of Chicago while the sky was still painted a pale purple. The highways were empty, allowing me to drive in silence, accompanied only by my thoughts. As I left the city behind, the air flowing through the cracked window became purer. I began to catch the scent of pine needles and the crispness of the lake, Door County, a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary, a keeper of sweet memories. Now it felt like a battlefield I was marching toward. The cabin sat somewhat isolated, at the end of a short dirt road surrounded by dense woods. As I turned onto the gravel driveway, I saw it. A two-story wooden structure that seemed to blend perfectly into the surrounding nature. Beautiful, serene, and entirely filled with lies. I parked my car next to a silver sedan that was already there. Leo's car. He had already arrived. My heart beat a little faster. This was reality. All of this was actually happening. I grabbed my purse from the passenger seat and, taking a deep breath to calm myself, stepped out of the car. The morning air was cool and slightly damp. In the distance, the sound of the wind moving through the pine trees served as a melancholic soundtrack. The front door was unlocked. I slowly pushed it open and stepped inside. Leo was standing in front of the large living room window that looked directly out over the lake. In his hands, he held a mug of coffee with a thin trail of steam rising from it. He did not turn around when I walked in, as if he had already sensed my presence. "Have you been here long?" My voice sounded a bit raspy. About an hour, he replied, still looking at the water. I needed some time to see this place again. I understood what he meant. I dropped my bag on one of the couches and walked over to stand beside him, looking out at the same view. The lake was calm that morning, a leaden gray color. I remembered standing in this exact spot with Andrew 3 years ago, after my miscarriage. Andrew had held me tightly. He promised that we would get through everything together, that this place would bear witness to us rebuilding our happiness. That promise now felt like poison. The last time I was here was 3 years ago, I said quietly, speaking more to myself than to Leo, after losing our first baby. Leo finally turned and looked at me. In his tired eyes, I now read a flash of sympathy, the understanding of someone who knows what loss feels like. Natalie desperately wanted kids too, he said softly. After 2 failed rounds of IVF, she stopped talking about it. I thought it was because it hurt her too much. Turns out, her mind was occupied with something else. We fell back into silence, each lost in our own pain. There were no tears, just a heavy silence filled with unspoken words and broken promises. In that silence, we found a strange connection. We were not friends, not even good acquaintances. We were 2 wounded souls standing in the ruins of our marriages, trying to find a way not to collapse along with them. Do you think we are taking this too far? A tiny sliver of doubt crept into my mind. Leo slowly shook his head. His gaze returned to the lake. No. Maybe if this was just for revenge, but it is not. This is about making them face reality stripped of all its decorations. It is about taking back the truth that was stolen from us. His words gave me strength. He was right. It was not about causing them pain. It was about stopping our own. It was about closing the chapter in a way that left no unanswered questions, no room for further manipulation. Then let us set the stage, I said. My voice grew firmer. We sprang into action, not like hosts preparing for a party, but like crime scene investigators reconstructing a scene. Every movement we made was loaded with meaning, a silent ritual. I started by wiping down the long wooden table in the center of the room. The table where Andrew and Natalie probably sat often, plotting their next string of lies. I scrubbed the surface until it gleamed, as if trying to erase the fingerprints of their betrayal. Leo went out to his car and came back with a bottle of red wine. Natalie's favorite, he said, placing the bottle in the center of the table, a minor detail that inflicted immense pain. I took 4 crystal glasses out of the kitchen cabinet, the exact glasses Andrew always insisted on using when we came here. It was part of his ritual to show off his refined taste. I arranged them on the table, perfectly in a row. 2 on one side, 2 on the other. The perfect setup for a confrontation. We moved 2 large armchairs, so their backs faced the entryway. That way, when they walked in, they would have no choice but to walk around them and face us head-on. We were not going to ambush them from behind. We were waiting to meet them face to face. We adjusted the lighting in the room to be warm, yellowish. Not too bright, so as not to create unnecessary alarm right away, but bright enough that we could catch every nuance of the expressions that would soon appear on their faces. We wanted to see everything: the shock, the guilt, the fear. How do you think they will react? I asked, as we sat down for a moment to evaluate the fruits of our labor. The room looked so ordinary, so peaceful. A flawless trap. Leo shook his head. Natalie will cry. That is her weapon. Andrew, I do not know. Maybe he will get angry. Maybe he will beg. But of one thing I am absolutely certain. Neither of them will be ready for the fact that we know everything. They will not be ready for us. We spent the rest of the day talking no longer about the betrayal, but about ourselves. I told him about my dream of opening a small independent bookstore in Monterey, California, a dream Andrew had always mocked, calling it unrealistic. Leo talked about how he had once almost quit architecture to move to France and study to become a baker. We talked about the versions of ourselves we had lost long ago, buried under layers of compromises and sacrifices in our marriages. Outside, the sky slowly began to turn a shade of deep orange. The wall clock read 5 o'clock in the evening. Less than an hour, I said quietly. Are you afraid? Leo looked into my eyes. I am not afraid of the truth. I am afraid of forgiving something that does not deserve to be forgiven. I slowly nodded. We walked out onto the deck and stood side by side, watching the sunset. A light breeze carried the scent of autumn silence. Time seemed to stand still. We were ready. The stage was set. Now all that was left was to wait for the lead actors to make their entrance. At 5:57 p.m., The air inside the cabin grew so thick and tense it felt like a guitar string ready to snap. Leo and I sat in silence in the two armchairs facing away from the door. We were like two statues waiting for the play to begin. On the table between us stood the bottle of red wine, flanked by the empty crystal glasses. On the seat next to me lay a thick manila envelope. Inside was all the ammunition we needed. Copies of their texts, printouts of credit card statements, and even a short audio recording of a call to Andrew's secretary, who had casually confirmed that there were no client seminars scheduled in New York this weekend. We had not come empty-handed. And then we heard it, the crunch of gravel under car tires. The sound was so loud in the absolute silence that it drove straight into my chest. Leo turned and looked at me. His eyes asked a question without words. I did not speak. I just gave a short, firm nod. It was time. A black SUV parked right in front of the deck. We could clearly see it through the large windows. Andrew stepped out of the driver's side first. He was wearing a leather jacket. In one hand he held a small duffel bag, in the other, a gift bag. He looked relaxed, happy. Following him, Natalie stepped out of the passenger door. In her arms, she held a bouquet of soft pink tulips. They were laughing together. The sound of their laughter, joyful and carefree, drifted faintly through the glass. They looked like newlyweds arriving at their little paradise. The sight was like a knife to the gut, the illusion of their happiness, built entirely on our pain. A key turned in the lock. The heavy wooden door creaked open. Natalie walked in first. With a smile still playing on her lips, she stepped elegantly into the room. Her gaze swept across the space, and then her smile froze. Literally froze halfway, as if someone had hit the pause button on her life. Her eyes, which had been sparkling seconds before, widened in sheer horror as her gaze shifted from me to Leo sitting right beside me. Andrew, who was following close behind, bumped into her back because she had stopped so suddenly. "What is wrong, honey?" His voice still sounded cheerful. Then he looked up, following Natalie's gaze, and in that split second, our eyes met. I watched the transformation happen in real time. Confusion, shock, denial, and finally, panic so pure you could touch it. The gift bag slipped from his grasp. The bottle of expensive champagne inside rolled across the wooden floor and smashed against the leg of the table. Boom! A sharp pop, followed by the sound of foaming liquid spilling everywhere, filling the room with the pungent smell of alcohol. Natalie's mouth opened, but not a single sound came out. The bouquet of tulips slipped from her fingers. The delicate pink petals scattered across the floor. It was the perfect visual metaphor for what had just happened. Her fantasy had shattered into a million pieces. The silence, briefly broken by the sound of shattering glass, returned even heavier and more suffocating than before. I let the moment stretch for a few seconds to let them fully grasp their situation. Then I spoke. "Welcome to your weekend getaway." My voice sounded as light as a breeze. Serene, in total contrast to the electrified atmosphere. We prepared the wine, the seats, and the truth. Andrew was paralyzed, his lips pressed into a hard line. The color drained from his face. Natalie took half a step back, shooting a panicked glance at Leo, as if looking for help, for a way out of this nightmare. But there was no way out. There was nowhere to hide. The curtain had risen. The performance had begun. The shards of the broken champagne bottle glistened on the hardwood floor, reflecting the warm light of the room. The sharp scent of alcohol now mixed with the smell of the trampled, wilting tulips. Amidst this little circle of chaos, the four of us remained completely motionless, locked in a surreal tableau. Andrew was the first to move, the first to try to pick up the pieces of the reality that had just shattered. "Chloe," he began, his voice hoarse. He took a step forward, raising a hand as if trying to calm me down, as if I were some wild animal that needed taming. A dry laugh devoid of any amusement escaped my lips. The ultimate cliché, the first line of defense of a caught cheater. "Oh, is that so?" I said, tilting my head slightly. "And what exactly is it supposed to look like?" "Explain it to me, Andrew. What am I supposed to think about Natalie's text saying she could not wait to see you at our cabin, or the lingerie she bought especially for you?" Andrew's face contorted. He clearly had not expected me to know such specific details. His eyes darted to Natalie in sheer panic. I continued. My voice was calm and steady, like a prosecutor reading off a list of charges. "What am I supposed to think about the credit card charges at expensive restaurants we never went to? Or the Uber receipts showing rides to Natalie's neighborhood at hours when you were supposedly working late at the office?" Every question was a precision strike. I knew it by the way his shoulders slumped, by the way he avoided my gaze. It was Leo's turn to stand up. He did not look at Andrew. His eyes were locked on his wife, Natalie, who was trembling near the door. "And what about me, Natalie?" Leo said. His deep voice shook with restrained emotion. "What am I supposed to think? You told me you were going on a corporate retreat to Door County with your coworkers. You even sent me a text last night right before you turned your phone off. Good night, I miss you. Did I make that up too?" Leo's question broke right through Natalie's defenses. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob. "Leo, please, do not do this," she managed to choke out through her tears. "Do not do what?" Leo's voice rose an octave. His pain was now entirely audible. "Do not stand here and face you? Do not listen to the truth? Do not watch my wife cheat on me inside the house I built with my own 2 hands?" That last sentence was a low blow, even to me. This house was his creation. Every corner was a manifestation of his art and his love, and they had defiled it. I walked over to the table and picked up the thick envelope I had prepared. I did not open it. I simply dropped it onto the wooden table with a thud loud enough to demand their attention. "I did not come here to argue," I said. My voice took control of the room once more. "I came here with facts." Andrew stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. In a fit of anger and desperation, he snatched it and ripped it open. He pulled out the stack of papers. I watched his eyes dart rapidly across the lines, saw his expression shift as he processed the printed chat logs, the photographic evidence, the financial records. His eyes, previously filled with panic, now turned red with fury. A few seconds later, he threw the papers onto the floor. "You were spying on me?" he yelled, finally losing his temper. I looked him dead in the eye, unflinching. "I was not spying on you, Andrew. I was confirming the truth. A truth I had suspected for entirely too long, and because you were so meticulous with your lies, I had to be even more meticulous to uncover them." Natalie sank into one of the dining chairs. Her body shook with sobs. Leo did not move an inch to comfort her. He stood there, looking down at his wife with a mixture of profound disappointment, anger, and deep sorrow. "How long?" Leo asked Natalie. His voice dropped back to a low register, but it sounded colder now. 7 months, Natalie whispered. 7 months. 210 days of lies. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. For those 7 months, I had still been trying to be a good wife, trying to fix what I thought was failing in our marriage, entirely unaware that I was fighting alone. Andrew approached me again, this time with a pleading look. "Chloe, I messed up. I know I made a terrible mistake, but that does not mean I stopped loving you." I took a step back, putting distance between us. "Stop," I said, and for the first time, my voice cracked not from sadness, but from an anger that had finally reached its boiling point. "Do not talk to me about love, Andrew. If the love you are talking about is the kind that allows you to cheat on me with another woman, I do not want it." I paused, allowing a bitter memory to surface as I swept my gaze across the room. "And if the love you are talking about is the kind that allows you to bring your mistress to the exact place where we lost our baby, then you can keep it." My words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Absolute silence fell over the room. Even Natalie's sobbing stopped. I saw Andrew freeze completely. He looked as if he had just been physically slapped. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That memory, our deepest wound, was the ultimate weapon he could never argue against. I shot him one last look. "You can leave right now, or you can sit down and listen until the end. But if you think there is even a fraction of a chance for forgiveness, then you do not know who I am at all." Leo turned to Natalie, then looked at me. "I need some fresh air." I nodded. "Me too." The two of us walked out, passing by Andrew and Natalie, who remained glued to their spots. We stepped out onto the deck, leaving the two of them alone amid the wreckage of the lies we had just blown apart. Outside, the Wisconsin sky had grown almost completely dark. The wind rustled through the pines louder than before. The storm was just beginning. After spending a few minutes on the deck to let the cold air clear our heads, we walked back into the living room. The atmosphere inside felt post-apocalyptic. Andrew and Natalie were now sitting in chairs far away from each other, avoiding eye contact. The papers detailing their betrayal were scattered across the floor like dead autumn leaves. The air was thick with regret and painful reality. I pulled up a chair and sat directly across from Andrew. Leo sat down beside me. His cold, direct gaze was fixed on Natalie. For a long time, no one spoke a word, until I placed a second folder on the table. It was navy blue, distinct from the manila envelope. I felt the energy in the room shift instantly. "Andrew," I began, looking him squarely in the eye. Did you ever tell Natalie why we have kept separate bank accounts for the last 6 years? Andrew's body stiffened. He looked at me with a pleading expression. Chloe, this has nothing to do with— I will tell her, I interrupted, cutting off his excuse. I shifted my gaze to Natalie, who was now looking at me in sheer confusion. You probably do not know this, Natalie, but this man you admire so much racked up over $50,000 in credit card debt in 2018. His parents had to secretly bail him out to save his career. After that, I had to separate our finances. Not out of spite, but because I saw firsthand how effortlessly he could hide something so massive. The shock on Natalie's face was genuine. I am sure Andrew never mentioned that to you, because it does not fit his narrative. This has nothing to do with today, Andrew snapped. It does, I replied calmly. It has everything to do with lies. Andrew, you justified your affair by telling your mistress that I was too busy, too cold. But you conveniently forgot to mention that I was the one carrying the vast majority of our financial burden. I am the one who paid the mortgage on this cabin every single month while you played games and lied behind my back. Andrew hung his head low. He had nothing left to say. The truth had disarmed all his defenses. Now it was Leo's turn. His voice, firm but icy, was directed at Natalie. And you, Natalie, you told me the bank was delaying the approval for our roof repair loan. But in reality, you wired $10,000 to a rehab center in Oak Brook. The recipient was Jason Miller. Your brother, right? Natalie was speechless. Her face turned even paler. I did not want to upset you. No, Leo said. You did not want to share the truth. You were living 2 lives, one with me, one with Andrew. And the worst part is, both of them were built on secrets. You lied to me about your family's problems, and I am fairly certain you never told Andrew about them either. Silence swallowed the room once more. I slowly nodded. That is the only thing the two of you actually have in common, I said, looking back and forth between Andrew and Natalie. You were never honest with us, your spouses, or even with each other. You only presented a beautifully packaged version of yourselves that you thought the other person would like. Natalie started crying again. I never meant for it to go this far. But you let it, I countered. I do not know what hurts more, being betrayed, or realizing that the person who betrayed you lacks the courage to admit they were wrong from the very start. Andrew looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. I am sorry, Chloe. I really am. I am so sorry. I looked at him. A drop of pity mixed with my anger. Sorry does not change the facts, Andrew. And love, if it ever truly existed between us, cannot save a marriage that rotted from the root. Leo stood up. He no longer looked angry, just infinitely tired. Natalie, he said, do you know what the most insulting part is? It is not just the cheating. It is the fact that not once, not for a single second, did you trust me enough with your problems? You decided I was not worthy of sharing your burdens. Just when it seemed all the cards of deceit were laid out on the table, when we thought nothing else could possibly shock us, Natalie suddenly stood up. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them, a mix of terror and desperation. There is something else I have not told you, her voice trembled. All eyes locked onto her. Leo frowned. Andrew looked at her with deep suspicion. Natalie swallowed hard. Her eyes darted to Andrew, and then rested on me. I am pregnant. Absolute silence hung in the room, so absolute that the ticking of the wooden wall clock sounded deafening. Every second felt like a blade slicing through the air. Andrew jumped out of his chair. What? What did you just say? Natalie nodded. Her lips quivered. I found out last week. I was going to tell you here, this weekend. She said the last sentence, looking directly at Andrew. Leo froze. His expression was unreadable. Then he asked, his voice barely a whisper, is it his? Natalie turned to him. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. Yes. I am sure. Andrew and we always used protection. My world seemed to flip upside down. For a few seconds, my mind went entirely blank. Nothing could have prepared us for this. There was no script. There was no plan on how to handle the ticking time bomb that had just detonated in the middle of the room. The introduction of a new life changed the entire dynamic of this confrontation, turning it into something far more complex, far more painful. Natalie's confession hung heavily in the air. A time bomb had exploded without a sound, but its impact was devastating. A new life, conceived in a sea of lies and destruction. Andrew was the first to recover from the shock. But his reaction was not that of a man who just found out his mistress was pregnant. Yes, there was surprise, but terror and disgust dominated his features. His eyes darted rapidly from Natalie's face to her stomach and back. "You are pregnant by him?" he asked, his voice strained. He jutted his chin toward Leo. There was something in his tone, in the sheer contempt with which he said the word him, that made it sound as if this pregnancy was an annoying complication, a stain on his perfect escapist fantasy. And for the first time all evening, I saw a flash of anger from Natalie. Through her sobs and swollen face, she shot Andrew a piercing glare. "Do not call him," she hissed. "He has a name. He is Leo, my husband. And yes, I made a massive mistake betraying him, but at least I never lied to him about my feelings for you." Natalie's words were a double slap to Andrew's face. First, the confirmation that the baby was not his. Second, the implicit accusation that Andrew's love for me was nothing more than a lie. I watched Andrew take a step back. His face had now turned into an impenetrable mask. Shock, shame, or perhaps the absolute emptiness of a man realizing he had just lost everything. He had lost me, and it seemed he never truly possessed Natalie. He was just a rest stop along the way, a temporary escape. While the three of them were tangled in this new drama, I felt something strange. Absolute clarity. Natalie's pregnancy was a shock, but it changed absolutely nothing for me. This was her problem. This was the consequence of their actions. Her chaos was no longer my chaos. This complex knot that had just been tied only solidified my decision to cut the strings connecting me to all of them. I took a deep breath, steadying my briefly elevated pulse. I was once again the Chloe I knew, the chief financial officer. Calm, methodical, always focused on the bottom line. I think that is enough surprises for one evening. My voice sliced through the tension. I leaned forward and picked up my bag from the floor. I opened it and pulled out the final folder. It was burgundy. I slowly placed it on the coffee table next to the still unopened bottle of wine. And since all the cards are on the table, I am not going to drag this out. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of perfectly collated papers. "These are the divorce papers and all the financial documentation I prepared," I explained. "Our shared assets have already been legally separated into individual accounts. Everything has been reviewed by my lawyer. Unlike certain people in this room, I hide nothing." Andrew stared at the papers in disbelief. "Chloe, you cannot be serious. You can read them now or refuse to sign them," I continued, entirely ignoring the plea in his voice. "But you will not change my mind." Across the room, Natalie sat back down, her hands instinctively wrapped around her stomach. Leo turned to her. The coldness on his face was slowly dissolving, making way for a look of sheer exhaustion and resignation. "I need time to process all of this," Leo said to Natalie. His voice was low but controlled. "But if you are keeping this baby, I will take care of it. The child is not to blame for any of this." I saw a glimmer of relief wash over Natalie's face. She nodded, too choked by tears to speak. "I know. Thank you for saying that." I looked back at Andrew. "I do not know if you have anything left to say, but if you do, now is the time." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, exhausted. "Chloe," he pleaded, None of this is worth destroying our marriage over. We have had so many good memories." There it was, his final card. Nostalgia. I nodded. "That is true, Andrew. We had a lot of good memories. But the fact that you decided to trade all of them for the cheap thrill of an affair with someone who could not even be honest with her own husband means that I have to protect the rest of my life from your bad decisions." I pulled a pen from my jacket pocket. With a firm hand, I signed every page that required my signature. In the quiet room, the sound of the pen scratching against the paper was distinct. Every stroke was a release. I was no longer clinging to a fragile marriage. I was no longer trying to trust someone who did not deserve my trust. Putting the pen down, I felt lighter. Lighter than I had felt in years. I looked at Andrew, the man who had consumed my entire youth, the dream of my family. "Good luck," I told him. "You are going to need it." When I stood up, Leo stood up as well. He gave a respectful nod. "I will wait for you in the car, Chloe. If you need anything, let me know." I nodded, deeply grateful for his calm presence that night. Just as I was about to walk out, Natalie hesitantly approached me. "I know I do not deserve to ask for your forgiveness," she said quietly, "but I truly never wanted things to go this far." I looked her straight in the eyes. The anger was gone, only clarity remained. The most dangerous people are not the ones who are openly malicious, I told her. They are the ones who convince themselves they are good people while continuing to live a lie. She froze at my words for a moment, then looked away. I walked out of the cabin without looking back, leaving Andrew staring blankly at the papers on the table, and Natalie huddled in the corner, holding on to the only thing she had left. The life that, as she had just confessed, was growing inside her. We drove away from the cabin around 9 o'clock that evening. No one walked us out. There was no need. We walked to our cars in silence. Only the crunch of gravel under our feet broke the stillness of the night. Leo opened my car door for me, a gesture of politeness that felt strange amidst all the chaos. Then he got into the driver's seat of his car. Before starting the engine, he rolled down his window and looked at me. "Do you want to grab something to eat?" he asked. "I know a little tavern downtown in Sister Bay. It stays open late. Nothing fancy, but it is comforting." I laughed. A hoarse, unexpected laugh, but it felt incredibly real. After all the drama, all the tears and lies, this simple question felt stunningly normal. "Yes," I replied. "Let us go. I am starving." We sat side by side in the modest tavern, illuminated by a slightly flickering neon sign. The warm yellow light washed over the scuffed wooden booth in front of us. We did not try to psychoanalyze what had just happened. Instead, we talked about calmer things. About the time Leo considered dropping out of architecture school to bake bread, or my dream of opening a bookstore cafe in Monterey, an idea I had buried after Andrew called it unrealistic. After dinner, we said goodbye with a simple handshake and a silent nod. We did not become lovers, but that night, I realized I had found something far more fundamental: a friend. Someone who had walked through the darkest night of my life right beside me. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a small house in Pacific Grove near Monterey, California. In my hands, I held a mug of hot tea. I looked out at the waves crashing against the Pacific coastline. The divorce from Andrew was finalized in less than 2 months. Thanks to my meticulous preparation, the documentation, the evidence, and the clearly defined assets, he put up very little resistance. He probably realized that the longer he dragged it out, the more he would lose. I walked away with the majority of our assets, including a cash buyout for the cabin in Door County, which I sold entirely to him. I had no need for a place haunted by the ghosts of my past. Andrew's career at the financial firm stalled. His boss, a strict but fair executive, somehow caught wind of the chaos in his personal life. Officially, nothing was ever said, but he was slowly removed from high-profile projects. From being the prime candidate for the next CEO, he was downgraded to managing a second-tier team. Natalie gave birth last week. Leo sent me a text. "She is here, a healthy baby girl. Feelings are complicated, but we are trying." He attached a photo, a tiny hand wrapping around Natalie's finger. Leo was looking at the camera with a tenderness I had never seen in him before. I did not know if they would make it as a couple, but it was clear that, however late, they were learning to be honest with each other and with themselves. Meanwhile, I live alone in my new house by the ocean, not too far from the hustle, but quiet enough to hear the wind every morning. I changed careers. I am no longer a chief financial officer, but an independent financial advisor working on my own schedule. No more high-stress board meetings, no more midnight email bombardments. I am also learning to pause, to rest, to breathe. Leo and I still keep in touch. Not constantly, but consistently. Sometimes it is just holiday greetings. Sometimes texts like, "Just saw a design for a stunning French-style villa near Carmel and thought of you. It is a masterpiece." And sometimes it is just a 15-minute phone call to ask, "How are you doing?" I do not need anything more. We survived one of the longest nights of our lives together, and even though neither of us has ever said it out loud, I know we are friends. The kind of friendship that requires no labels, that is understood with a single look. That afternoon, I sat on my deck with my favorite book while a small speaker next to me played soothing acoustic guitar music. I no longer thought about Andrew. There was no more pain, no more regret, just a peace as quiet as the sea on a windless day. I had survived what once felt impossible, and most importantly, I had found myself again. Andrew was a massive part of my world, but he was not my final destination. He came into my life to teach me a very expensive lesson. To wake me up and make me realize that trust should not be given to someone who does not know how to protect it. That love does not last when honesty disappears. And that blind sacrifice makes us forget our own worth. If someone were to ask me today, "Chloe, do you regret any of it?" I would answer without hesitation, no. Because some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us when it is time to leave. My story is not a tragedy, it is a journey of rebirth. From a betrayed wife, I transformed into a woman who stood her ground, healed herself, and learned to love herself again. Sometimes losing something paves the way for something infinitely better. And I am grateful that I had the courage to walk away at the most crucial moment. 3 years. A span of time that feels like an entire lifetime. And yet, it feels like it was just yesterday. I sat on the porch overlooking the garden, holding a cup of French press coffee and a half-filled notebook. From here, I could see my small vegetable patch, lush cherry tomatoes, peppers just starting to turn red, and basil leaves releasing their fresh scent with every gust of wind. In the distance stretched the Pacific Ocean, deep and blue beneath a clear morning sky. 3 years ago, on a day just like this, I sat in a cabin in Wisconsin, waiting to blow up my own world. Today, I sit here in a new world that I built from the ruins. And this world feels so much stronger, so much more real. I do not think about Andrew often anymore, not because I actively avoid it, but because he simply does not take up space in my mind. The memory of him has faded into an old movie I watched a long time ago. I know the plot, I remember some scenes, but the emotions that were once so intense are now muted, replaced by a safe, distant detachment. A few months ago, an old friend from Chicago sent me a text. She had bumped into Andrew at a real estate convention. She told me he looked different, thinner, much quieter. He had resigned from his old firm a year after our divorce and was now working for a smaller developer out in Omaha, Nebraska. He had moved to a new city, starting over from scratch. I read the text and felt absolutely nothing. No vindication over karma catching up with him, no residual ache, just a calm realization. His story was no longer my story. He was a stranger with whom I had once shared a bed for years. I prayed he would find peace not for his sake, but because genuinely wishing him peace meant I was finally, truly free. My connection with Leo survived, evolving into a rare and genuine friendship. We FaceTime about once a month. His call caught me while I was watering the plants. His face appeared on the screen, wearing that same signature tired smile. But now, there was a spark in his eyes that had not been there before. Behind him, a little girl with curly hair was running around and laughing. "That is Nina. She finally learned how to pronounce my name right," Leo said with a soft smile as Nina hugged his leg. "It only took her 2.5 years to decide if I am Leo or Daddy Leo." I smiled. "You look happy." "She is my whole world," Leo replied. He paused, his expression turning slightly more serious. "Natalie and I tried. We are great parents to Nina, but as a couple, we realized you cannot fix what is already broken. We decided to peacefully separate 6 months ago. It is better this way. More honest. No more secrets, no more pretending. Just a partnership to raise our daughter." The news did not surprise me. Some cracks are just too deep to patch. "I am sorry, but I am glad you found an honest path forward," I said. "Yeah, honesty. An expensive lesson," he murmured. "What about you, Chloe? Has some lucky guy managed to steal your heart out there on the coast?" "My heart is currently unavailable for theft. I am too busy owning it myself, and it feels incredibly good. My work as a financial advisor has given me a new sense of purpose. I do not just help recently divorced women reorganize their assets. I listen to their stories. I see the exact same fear in their eyes that I once felt. The terror of the unknown, the dread of being alone, and I am able to look them in the eye and say with absolute conviction, 'You are going to be okay. You are so much stronger than you think, and I am the living proof.' I became a lighthouse for ships that had sailed into the same violent storm I once did. I turned my scars into a map so others could find their way back to themselves. As the sun began to dip toward the west, I closed my notebook and walked down to the beach in front of my house. I slipped off my sandals, letting the warm California sand touch my bare feet and the sea foam wash over them. People often ask me, "Did you forgive Andrew?" For a long time, I did not know the answer. But now I understand. Forgiveness was never the end goal. I did not need to grant him my forgiveness in order to heal. What I needed was acceptance. Accepting that it all happened. Accepting that I was once hurt so deeply. Accepting that the pain changed me. And most importantly, forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for not seeing the red flags sooner. Forgiving myself for being so naive in love. Forgiving myself for ever believing I needed someone else to be whole. I no longer feel empty. I am whole on my own, yet I am never lonely. My life might be quieter now, but it is infinitely more peaceful. It is filled with the little things, the smell of coffee in the morning, the joy of watching a garden grow, the laugh of a client when she finally buys her first car with her own money, and, of course, the sound of the ocean waves constantly whispering that life goes on.